Most people open up Claude Code, start chatting with it immediately, and only realize about 20% of what it's actually capable of. So in this video, I'm going to give you a slightly more advanced Claude Code tutorial where I show you my real professional setup, and we go over things like creating skills, subagents, connecting to MCP servers, and just overall build a much deeper understanding of how Claude Code works so you can utilize it in your workflow better. Now, one thing to note is that what I show you here may not be what you need for your workflow, but it will show you how to set it up so that you can customize Claude Code, because that's where it becomes extremely powerful. So with that said, let's get over to the computer and let's start looking at some more advanced Claude Code features so you can get much more productivity and benefits from it. Okay, so I'm on the computer now and we're going to dive in. Now, I'm sure at this point that you probably already know how to run Claude. If you don't, and you've never seen Claude Code before, you don't understand the basics, then you'll definitely want to watch this video first. I'll put it on screen and link it in the description, which goes over everything you need to know in terms of installing it, setting up all of the basic stuff, whereas this is going to be more of an intermediate or advanced tutorial for those of you that already know the simple stuff. Okay, now with that in mind, let's pop into Claude Code here. And the first thing I want to do is just have a look at a few commands that you need to be aware of. Now, depending on the type of plan that you're using, you likely do want to change the model that Claude is using depending on what it is that you're doing. So you can run this /model command, and this will allow you to switch between the different models. Now, I know a lot of you know that, but especially if you're on the $20 per month plan, you definitely don't want to just be using Opus by default because it's really overkill. It costs a ton of money, and you're going to get significantly more usage if you switch to something like Sonnet or even Haiku. Sonnet is just a default model that should work for most tasks. Opus for something more complicated, and then Haiku when you want to do something simple or generate a bunch of data, or you want to do like a long running task that you don't want to use all of your usage up for with Haiku or with Opus, sorry. So just switch between these and make sure that you are kind of aware of what model that you're using, because you can really quickly rip through all of the credits here. Even if you're on the max plan like I am, you can get out of the usage very, very quickly. Okay, now continuing, another command that I recently found out about, which is super cool, is this /insights command. And when you run this /insights command, what it's going to do is generate a full report for you on how you use Claude Code, talk to you about mistakes that you're making, things that you're doing well, where Claude Code is working for you, where it's not working for you, and generate a full web page with all of the results. If you haven't yet, definitely take a look at this because it can be really insightful, hence /insights. Once it finishes generating, I'll show you quickly what mine looks like, and then we'll move on. Okay, so you can see that it's generated this report for me. It's just in a local file. So in order to open that, you can just go into like a Chrome tab. Okay, this is just my reference file. Let's open this up. And you can see that it shows you everything here. Now, I'm not going to go through my full usage here, but generally speaking, you can see that it gives you a really detailed guide with a ton of graphs and charts and messages, and at a glance, what's working, what's not working, etc. So have a look at that, and I guarantee you're going to learn something. Now, a few other commands you want to know. First, /cost. So if you are running on some kind of API, you can run this and it will tell you how much it's costing. In my case, it's free because I'm just using the subscription. And then the /context command is also a really useful command. What this will do for you is show you all of the things that are being used in your current context and give you a sense of kind of what percentage of them are from what different sources. Now, again, especially if you don't want to run out of the usage, which is important, you should check this, especially in longer conversations. And you can see that we've used 25,000 of our 1 million tokens. You can see the system prompt, 6.9, system tools, skills, messages, free space, all of this kind of stuff. And then it shows you all of the MCP tools that are being loaded in here. And you'll notice that depending on what MCP provider you're using or how you set up MCP, you may have a ton of tools here that are being loaded in that you just don't need. So I would highly recommend disabling tools that you're not using in a session, because that will save you a lot on the context, and also just make Claude Code be a little bit faster and easier to run, because it's not going to be searching through a ton of tools that you just aren't actively using. Like in my case, I have all these Zapier tools where like I'm not actually using them right now, and they're just bloating the context and potentially confusing Claude Code. Now, the last quick command to go over here is /compact. What this is going to do is clear the current history that you have, but keep a summary of that in the context. So if you're getting near the context window, or you just don't want it to be as expensive because the context window is quite large, you can compact this. Again, what it will do is summarize the current conversation and include a small amount of tokens in this session so that you can keep going with the same session without losing everything. Compact is not always the best strategy, but it's just a command that you should be aware of. Okay, so those are a few basic commands. The next thing that I want to go over is adding MCP servers. Now, MCP servers really make this significantly more useful, and there's a few different ways that you can add MCP servers to Claude Code. Now, if you're directly inside of the terminal here, you can run the /mcp command where you're able to see all of the different servers that you have. You can see I have some enabled, disabled, right, automatically built in, etc. Now, the one thing that you need to be aware of is that when you add MCP servers, you can add them at a project level, at a user level, or at a global level. And that's kind of the same with everything that I'm going to show you in this video. You can create something per a specific project, or you can make it globally for your entire Claude Code instance. So just be aware of when you're adding these and the scopes in which you're creating these different tools, because if you want it to be global, for example, but you just add it in the project, then you won't see it in other Claude Code sessions. The way this works is that Claude is automatically going to create a folder called .claude inside of the project where you're working with Claude Code. So let me get out of this here. Let's just type ls. Okay, I guess it's because we're in Claude, it's not directly executing it, but it should show us the current files that we have. And I don't know if we already have a .claude folder, but if not, if we start making any changes, it will automatically add it. Okay, so it looks like this folder is empty, but if I just exit out of Claude Code, let me just cd into one where I know we're going to have a Claude Code directory. So let's ls, let's cd into maybe our dev projects, ls cd into, and we'll go to the velocity one. And you'll see here if I do ls-a, just because it's a hidden folder, we have this .claude folder. And then if I cd into .claude, same thing, ls-a, you can see we have a settings.local.json. We don't need to have a look at that file, but the point is that anything that's specific to a project you're working in will go in this .claude folder. So just be aware of that, because if you add an MCP server, for example, by default, it just adds it to the project. It doesn't add it to the global scope. You need to change that when you're adding the server, which I'm going to show you here in a second. So let's cd back into our desktop and cd into the demo that we have here, ls run Claude, and we are back to go here. Okay, so as I mentioned, what we want to do is add a few MCP servers. Now, the first extremely useful MCP server to add is the GitHub MCP server. The reason you want that is because you want Claude to automatically be able to create remote GitHub repositories and push the code there for you. Yeah, sure, you can do it manually. It's not that much work, but generally having GitHub MCP just makes your life a lot easier. So let me show you how we add that, then we'll look at the next one. Okay, so I'm gonna leave a link to this page in the description, but the easiest way to add the GitHub MCP server is to run a terminal command. This is what the command looks like right here, Claude add, or Claude MCP add JSON GitHub, and then you put in all of this and you replace your GitHub PAT with your GitHub personal access token, which I will show you how to get. Now, we also can have a look here and notice about the scope. So as I was mentioning, it's going to scope to local by default, which means it's only available to you in the current project, okay? Then you can scope it to a project, so it's available to everyone in the project versus .mcp.json, or you can scope it to user, which is effectively global, where it means it's available across all of the projects. For something like GitHub, you probably want it available across all of the projects, so you would add this -- scope user to this command right here. Now, the way that you can get the personal access token, let's just open up a new window here so we can save that command to copy later, is the following. You're going to go to your GitHub account. Obviously, you need to have one. You're going to go to your, where is it here, settings. You're going to scroll down to your developer settings. You're going to go to personal access tokens, fine-grained token, and then you're just going to create a new token. So you go create new token, authenticate, specify the scopes you want it to have access to. Typically, it just needs access to the repo, and then it will give you that PAT. I'm not going to do this because I already have the MCP server added, but I'm going to show you now what you would do. So now what you do is you essentially take that token that you generated and replace it in this command. If you're unsure of how to do that, just open up some kind of notepad. So I would just paste this command in your notepad, and then you take this and you say, this is the token, and you just paste the token there, and then you run this command directly in your terminal. So what I mean by that is you literally just open up a new terminal, don't run it in Claude Code, so get out of Claude Code first, and you just directly run it in the terminal, not inside of Claude Code. And then same thing, you could add -- scope, and then you can say user, and this will install it globally for you. So that's how you add the GitHub MCP server. And then if you want to test if the MCP server is working, same thing, you can just restart Claude. From here, you type /mcp, and then you should see that GitHub is connected. And then you can go here and you can view all this stuff. You can re-authenticate, reconnect, whatever. And once you add the GitHub server, because you're using the personal access token, you shouldn't need to do any OAuth thing. It should just be set up for you. Okay, so that is the first thing that you want to install, GitHub MCP. Now, the next thing that I'm going to recommend adding is the Context 7 MCP server. Now, it's much easier to install this if you just open up the Claude desktop application. Now, this will sync with your Claude Code. So you can have Claude Code installed and then download the Claude desktop application. From here, let's just go back to a new session. You're going to go to the Code tab at the top. You're going to go to Customize, and you're going to go to Personal Plugins. Now, from Personal Plugins, what you're going to do here is Browse Plugins, and you're going to search for a plugin called Context 7. Now, I believe I already have it installed, so it's not showing it to me. Let's see, Context 7. Yeah, it's because I already have it installed, but essentially you're just going to install the Context 7 plugin, which looks exactly like this. What this does is give your Claude Code access to live, up-to-date documentation. It's free. You don't need to pay for it. And then there's a few other connectors or plugins you can add. For example, one that's pretty cool is called Superpowers. This is something that's going to give your Claude Code just a better ability to create large applications. It does use a lot more context and is a lot more expensive. So I would only recommend having this if you have the max plan, but essentially this comes with some pre-built agents as well as some pre-built skills to do things like brainstorming for a new idea, creating a mock-up, reviewing the code. But again, it does slow down Claude Code a lot, which is why I have it disabled right now. And then the last plugin that I've installed is called Playwright. Again, these are just, you can find them by default in Claude Code. It's just because I have them installed, they're not showing up again. But you can search Playwright and it will appear. Same thing, you just install it, and then automatically these will be added to your Claude Code. What Playwright will allow Claude Code to do is browser automation, so it can automatically test websites that you create by itself by running Playwright scripts and spinning up a Playwright browser instance. Not going to get into how that works exactly, but you can kind of get the idea there in terms of why those connectors are powerful. Okay, so those are two connectors, GitHub MCP and then the Context 7. And if you want to test if they're working, just say something like, create a new Git repo here and then create a new remote Git repository and just push a README file saying this is a demo application to GitHub. Okay, we're going to go ahead and press on enter if my dictation will load. Of course, it's being slow. Okay, so there it is. Let's go ahead and hit enter, and then it should have access to the GitHub MCP tools here in order to do that, and it should be reading through the available tools. And then if we want, we can change the mode here to just auto accept edits by hitting Shift Tab on your keyboard. So if you hit Shift Tab, you'll see that you can change between accept edits, plan mode, or just the default mode. So I'm just going to put accept edits on so that I don't need to keep accepting all of the edits that it's making. And then it should be able to do this. Now it's saying the command GH is not found. That's fine. It should default to use the MCP server. Sometimes it can be a little bit stupid. So you just have to direct it, hey, use the GitHub MCP server, and then it should use that. Okay, so we can see here it's now found, okay, I don't want to use GH, I'm going to use the GitHub MCP server, and it says I want to create a new repository, so go ahead and press on yes, and then it should be able to call that tool and complete that action. Okay, so it's saying this is live, so what I'm going to do is just open this up in my browser. Okay, let's go here, and let's see, and we see we have the remote repo. I didn't have to touch this, Claude just did that for us automatically. Okay, cool. So now we're connected to GitHub. Also, if you want to go even further, you can give your Claude Code its own GitHub account, although in my case, there's no need really to do that. And what we're going to do is move on to talk about skills. All right, so I'm just getting Claude here to generate a simple application in this directory so I can start showing you skills in a little bit more of a practical demo. But effectively, what a skill is a learned behavior from Claude. So we just added MCP servers, right? What MCP servers allow Claude to do is take additional actions that it doesn't normally have access to. So we can connect it to Notion, we can connect it to Google Drive, right? Any place where we want Claude to be able to take an action. From a developer setting, usually, a thing like GitHub makes a little bit more sense. Now let me just go ahead and accept that. Now, when we talk about skills, skills are not really actions that Claude Code is taking or like a tool that it's calling. It's more so a behavior that it's learning how to do or that it's learned how to do and it's documenting itself. All that a skill is really just a markdown file. And a markdown file is just a fancy formatted text file that explains to Claude kind of a step-by-step process that it should follow. So when people start talking about skills, really all they're saying is, hey, we have this workflow or this repeatable thing that we do a lot. So rather than just prompting Claude and explaining to it over and over again to keep doing the same thing, we can wrap that kind of workflow or repeatable task in a skill, which is effectively just a file. I'll show you exactly what it looks like in a second. And then when we want to do something in the future, we can just reference that skill and Claude Code will execute that. So that's literally all a skill is, and skills become useful when you actually use them inside of a project to do something repeatable. So for example, if you're always, changing some line in a file whenever something updates, maybe that's a skill that you create for Claude. If you want to review the code in a certain way where you're looking for maybe things that Claude doesn't do by default, you create a code review skill and then you point to it. If you want a certain deployment step where Claude, runs a few build commands and then executes something for you, then that's a skill, right, that you can give to Claude. So what I want to do right now is I want to show you how to create your own custom skill, exactly what the skill looks like, and then how to use it and invoke it. All right, so before we do the skill, I want to show you the difference between a prompt with and without the skill. So right now I have some code generated, right? We're not really looking at it, but if I do ls, maybe it will give me a quick look at the project structure. And what I just asked it to do is create like a simple API with Express that just represents like a basic library with, books, update a book, delete a book, all of this kind of stuff. Now running the command directly inside of Claude is really not the best because it's not giving me the output that I want to see. But the point is we have a bunch of files now, right? So what I could do is say something like, hey, review the code and give me an analysis of it. Now, if I do this, that's fine. Obviously, it's not very detailed prompt what I'm asking it, but it should be able to review the code and it will give me some kind of answer. The issue with this is that if I want the code reviewed in a certain way, I'm going to have to write this really detailed prompt. I'm going to have to remember what the prompt is. I'm going to have to do it again over and over again. And you can see that the way that it's reviewing it is fine, but it's probably not the format that I'm looking for or what I want to consistently get. So rather than trying to, mess with Claude every time and come up with the perfect prompt and save it in a notepad and, use it again, we just create a skill. So to create the skill, we can literally just tell Claude to create one. Hey, create a new code review skill, and then we can tell it what we want the skill to be. Now, the benefit here is that you can actually have Claude Code make these skills completely for you. And if you just give it enough detail on what you want, then it will document the process and make the skill. Then you can run the skill and you can tell Claude Code to continually improve the skill until you get it to a place where you're happy and then it doesn't need to touch it. So what I'm going to paste in here is just an example of what a skill could look like. You don't need to write this from scratch. You can just have Claude Code make it. So I'm just going to paste, this skill. I have one that I copied here, and let me just enter that in the middle. And this is kind of what it might look like. So name, code review, description, structured code review following team standards, and then it says follow this structure. Security, error handling, performance, code quality, testing for each finding, div severity, location, whatever. So this is the format that I want the code review to be in. And you can see that right now what it's doing is it's looking up the documentation on how to create a skill, and then it will make a new one for me, and it should just enter that into the skill file. Okay, so you can see what's happened here is it says, hey, we're going to create a new file. The file is called skill.md. It sits inside of the code review folder, which is inside of the skills directory inside of the .claude folder. So as I talked about before, you can have project and you can have global configuration. By default, when you make a skill, it's going to create it in the project level, not in the global scope. So it's creating this .claude folder, which is sitting in the local project repo. We then have a folder called skills. That's where all of the skills go. And then we have a skill called code review and skill.md. Now, skill.md is just the format for where this skill should go. And then inside of this file, if you had any scripts or other documentation, you could put them here and just understand that Claude will read this skill.md file first. And then from the skill.md file, you could reference other things that are inside of this folder. So let's go ahead and press on yes and just have it generate this skill, and then I want to test it out. Okay, so we can see that it's been created here. And now if I want to use the skill, what Claude will do automatically when you put it in this type of format is create a slash command that you can run. So I can actually run /code and then review like so. And it's saying unknown skill. I might just need to restart the session here for it to pick it up, but that should have worked. So let's just restart this. So /exit. Okay, and then let's just go to Claude. And then what we can do is say /skills. If we say /skills, okay, now we can see code review. And then what I can do is directly invoke the skill by doing /code-review. And there we go. It now appears. I just had to restart the session. So now if I do the code review skill, I can also pass a prompt with the code review. So I can say /code review and then tell it something to review, or in this case, just generally review the whole code base. And now you can see that it's giving it to me in the exact format that we want, where it's showing us security, right? And then let's wait a second, shows us the error handling, and we get exactly what we were looking for because we bundled it in this personal custom skill. So you should be creating a lot of different skills, make them at a project level, make them at a global level. And if there is a skill that you want to be at the global level, you can simply just tell Claude Code to put it there. So say, hey, I want to move this skill to the global level. Okay, let's give it a second here. It's being very slow because my internet is really bad. And then it should just be able to automatically move it there for you. Okay, so you can see it's asking to move it to the global level, which is inside of just my home folder and then .claude, whereas this Claude folder is just directly inside of my local directory. I'm just gonna go no, because I actually don't wanna do that. But you get the idea, okay, that's how you could move the skill to the global workspace. Now, there's a lot of other skills you should be creating. Generally speaking, when you do something a lot, wrap it into a skill, ask Claude Code to build the skill for you, review it, read it, make sure you understand it, and then adjust it as needed, and you're gonna get a lot better performance out of Claude Code. Now, it's also worth noting that Claude can automatically invoke these skills for you. So while you can just run the command to execute the skill, you don't need to. You can just say something that would involve the skill being used, and Claude Code will automatically figure out that it needs to call that. So if I just say something like, review my code in the main files, I don't know. It should understand, hey, I'm doing code review. Let me look at the skills I have. Oh, I have a skill review or code review skill. Okay, let's use that, and then go and invoke that skill. And you can see it does that, right? It's doing the code review skill, and it's giving me the exact same format as before. And that's the consistency that I'm talking about. Okay, so let's keep going here. I do also want to dive into subagents and a lot of other more advanced features like creating your own / commands. But first, I want to show you a visual way to work with Claude Code, because right now we're directly inside of the terminal, and it can be a little bit difficult to actually see and understand what Claude Code is doing and to start digging into some of those files that it's creating. Now, that's why I'm going to show you this tool called Nimbalyst here. This is what it looks like. It kind of looks like a traditional editor, but with a lot of other cool tools, and it's specifically designed to work with both Claude Code and Codex. Now, it is completely free. It is open source. You can download it right now from the link in the description. They don't even have an ability to pay for it. And I did team up with them for this video because it's a really cool app I've been using, and I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of it. Now, I just opened another project inside of here. You can open up any project you want in Nimbalyst. You just go File, open, and then you can just pick a project that you want to open. And when you do that, what's going to happen by default is you're going to have your Claude Code session appear on the right-hand side of your screen. You also can just make a new one, and then you get a new Claude Code session, and you get connected automatically to the Nimbalyst MCP server, which allows you to utilize this really cool interface. So you can see, like on the left side, you can see your Claude usage, you can see Codex, in this case we're not connected, you can see various extensions, which we'll talk about in a second. You can change the mode, so I'm just allowing all, but you can change it so that it asks, allows edits, all of that kind of stuff. You can change the color theme. And then if you have a look here, you can view a Kanban board, which in my opinion is the coolest part of this, that shows you what all of your different Claude Code sessions are doing at any given point. So you can see that I have this little task right here. I can move it across to different portions. And if you're someone who's a Claude Code power user, like I am in a lot of cases, if you have multiple sessions open, you can see them in all of the different status kind of lanes or whatever you want to call it here. So you can understand what's actually going on and really quickly switch between this view and all of the sessions you have to know what's actually happening with your Claude Code sessions. Now, of course, you can also view everything going on. So in this case, they have a really nice markdown viewer. So when you actually look at a markdown file, you can read all of the formatted markdown, not the raw text. And if you ask Claude to make a change, like let's say, I don't know, review my project guide and just make some small improvements. Okay, if I ask it to do that, we can actually view all of the diffs and changes that it's making to our files in real time, which is super cool. So you can see that I'm working with Claude, right? Using it on the right-hand side of my screen. And then again, if I go back here and I view the Kanban, you can see we're now in the inbox because I just sent the message. And this is going to start getting moved automatically into the correct column. So you can see it's now in the implementation column, even though I didn't refresh or do anything. And we can see that it's going to start actually making changes. And we can view changes automatically right here in the browser and see, or right here in the viewer, sorry, and see the markdown re-rendering as well as all of the diffs. And we can approve them, keep them, whatnot, directly from here. So you can actually see if I start scrolling down here that it highlighted in red the thing that it's removing and highlighted in green the thing that it's added. I can go between the different changes directly in the file to see any of the changes visually. And it's super cool that it works just directly here with all of the rendered code. So it's a lot easier to read, especially because markdown files are, the common thing that you're working with when you're working with something like Claude. Few other quick things to mention. They also have these custom extensions that you can have. So what I actually had this do previously is I just said, hey, build a custom extension so I can view all of the documentation for my project in one clean interface. I just put that directly in the Claude window here. And then Nimbalyst actually built its own extension So now I have this like custom dashboard for my project where I can view the whole project directory structure, all of the stuff that's going on with all of the tags and whatnot directly inside of here. So it's kind of a little bit difficult to explain, but it's like an extension on top of Claude Code that's specific to this project that Nimbalyst just built. Now there's a lot of other cool stuff you can do in this, but generally if you just want like a visual editor for Claude Code, you want to be able to view all the sessions, and to be honest, just the Kanban board alone makes it worth it to me, because again, it's free, it's open source, you don't need to pay for it, and you can just visualize what's going on. You also can create different plans, have decisions, track bugs, create tasks, all kinds of advanced stuff. I'm just really scratching the surface. And then last thing that I'll mention is they also have a mobile phone app. So what you can do is you can actually monitor all of your sessions and interact with Nimbalyst and your Claude Code session directly from your phone if you just download the app. Again, all free, all open source. That's the only reason I'm mentioning it to you guys. If you find it useful, download it, check it out. You can start opening your Claude Code sessions. If not, then no need to use it, but I'm gonna continue with this for the rest of the video as I start talking to you about sub-agents and other more advanced features. Okay, so let's continue now and talk a little bit about sub-agents. Now, sub-agents get confused quite frequently because there's multiple ways that you can use sub-agents within Claude Code. Now, a sub-agent is effectively just another AI agent that's running with its own context window outside of your main Claude Code session. So right now I'm in a session, right? I've created a new session for Claude Code. Now I could ask it to do something, that's fine, but I can also tell it to delegate a task to a sub-agent, or multiple sub-agents. I'm going to show you what that looks like in 1 second. Now, when I do that, what's going to happen is Claude Code will create multiple different versions of itself effectively that have their own context and their own prompt or kind of task that they need to achieve, and just go out there and achieve them. So that's the first thing that we're referring to when we talk about sub-agents, is these like multiple little agents that you can spin up to break down a task, right? But you can also create custom sub-agents. And when you create a custom sub-agent, you can give it a set of instructions that it always follows, and you can reuse that agent multiple times. So again, from your main Claude Code terminal, you can tell it, hey, go use my code reviewer agent, go use my GitHub agent, go use my deployment agent. And if that's already created and set up, it already has a framework to work from. If you don't do that, Claude Code creates the agent by itself based on what it needs to do. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but let's have a look at an example. So let's say I do something like, I want you to audit all of the documentation in this project and give me a concise summary on exactly what it covers and where there's gaps. I want you to spin up as many documentation files as there are sub-agents, so each agent handles tracking one documentation file, reports it back to you, and then you take the summary and give it to me. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and press enter here, and then I want to watch these sub-agents spin up and kind of show you what this looks like, and then we'll create our own custom sub-agent. Okay, so you can see what's happening is Claude is automatically creating a few explore sub-agents. Now these are sub-agents that are actually, or this is an agent framework I should say, that's pre-built into Claude Code. So Claude Code has a few pre-built sub-agents that it can trigger. It can also make custom ones, and in this case we're using the explore one, and you can see multiple of them are spun up. And then if you go to this little tab here, you can see there's a sub-agent tab. Okay, and you can see that it says 0 out of 5 just because these are now done running. And if you want to see what these sub-agents are doing, well, you can actually just go click into it and you can view the prompt that Claude provided to the sub-agent, and then what is it that they actually did, which is reading a README file, reading this, whatever, going through. And then there we go, we get the little message here. Let me just close this README file saying that this is finished. And if I scroll down, it gives me a full, complete list of what exactly was done. So major gaps, recommendation, etc. So this is cool, but again, where this gets more powerful is when we make our own sub-agent. Okay, so now let's move on to create a custom sub-agent. Now, sub-agents are going to live in this Claude folder here under an agents directory, and they're going to look almost the exact same as a skill. The only difference is that it's going to be its own agent effectively that can call other skills. Again, we'll dive into that in a second. Point is, to make a new sub-agent, we can go use the Claude Code terminal. So I can say Claude, and then I can type /agents. Then what I can do is create a new agent like this. I can pick, do I want it to be personal? Do I want it to be project? Okay, then you can generate with Claude where you just describe what you want the agent to be, or you can do manual, invocation here. So it's gonna say give an identifier for the agent. Let's go test writer. Okay, enter the system prompt for the agent. So I'm going to paste in the prompt that I have here, which is going to look something like this. Now, because we're going through this kind of interactive flow, I don't need to provide the top section. So I'm just going to delete that when my cursor gets up here. Okay, cool. So let's get rid of all of that because it's already going to know what it needs to do. And then we should just be able to select the model that we want to use and we're good to go. So then it's going to say, when should Claude use this agent? When you are writing tests. Okay, and then you can choose, do you want it to have access to all of the tools? Okay, so maybe I don't want execution tools. All right, so I'm going to hit enter on that and remove that. Do I want all tools? Okay, do I want only MCP tools? Right, you can choose what you want the agent to be able to do. I'm going to press on continue, and then you can select the model. I'm going to go with Sonnet, and for the color, let's go with orange. Okay, and then it's asking for the memory for this agent. So again, it can have no persistent memory. It can have memory in the user scope, local scope, or project scope. I'm going to go project scope, and then it shows me what the agent is going to look like. I'm going to press enter, and then the agent is now created, and we can start using it. Okay, so to use the agent once it's created, we effectively just need to tell Claude to do something that would utilize the agent. So if I say, hey, test the test writer agent, then it should just actually spin it up and start using it. So there's not a command that I'm aware of to manually invoke the agent, but Claude can invoke it by itself. So you can see now it's invoked test writer. The agent is going and executing and completing those different tasks on whatever it is that Claude told it to do. So the main difference between agents and skills is that agents are more flexible, they're general, and they're going to follow the system prompt and kind of persona that you've given them, whereas a skill is typically a workflow that an agent might use. So you might have a lot of different skills, but only like 2 or 3 agents. And to be honest, you don't really need to create your own custom sub-agents, because if Claude needs one, it's usually better at creating its own custom sub-agent than you would be. And you can tell Claude to make the agent and just save it persistently if you want. So I wouldn't focus too much on making your own sub-agents. I would just focus on instructing Claude to invoke multiple sub-agents when necessary, so it parallelizes the tasks, right? Hey, you have 6 tasks, go spin up 6 sub-agents to do that. If you start telling Claude to do that, you're going to get a lot better results than just trying to make your own custom agents. Now, just to add a little bit more context here in terms of how the sub-agents work, you can see that there's actually a whole detailed piece of documentation, I'll link it in the description, that goes over this from Anthropic. But you should be aware that when you're doing these sub-agents, right, so when you're creating them, they're going to inherit the tools from the main agent context that they're created within. So what you can do is you can actually scope specific tools to specific agents. So in this case, you can see tools, read, grep, glop, bash, right? You can disallow certain tools, which is a good use of sub-agents when you only want them to do something really specific. And then you can also have things like MCP servers directly for one agent. So if you have MCP servers that you only want to use in some context, or you don't want to confuse the agents with too many, then that's another good use of when you would create a sub-agent. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. You can also scope particular skills, for example, right? You can specify the memory that you want to use with persistent memory, conditional rules, hooks, like you can get really, really advanced here. I'm not going to get into all of that in this video, but I just wanted to show you that if you are going to go crazy with sub-agents, you should read something like this documentation or ask Claude to ingest it for you and give you a summary, so you can see, what's possible here in terms of the usage. What I showed you, just scratching the surface, I just want you to be aware. Again, I rarely find myself creating sub-agents, but you can manually if you need to for something really specific like this. Okay, so moving on, the next concept that I want to cover is memory. Now, first, you need to understand that in Claude Code, there is no persistent memory by default. What that means is that if I go in one Claude Code session, I tell it my name is Tim, and then I open a brand new session, Claude Code will not know that my name is Tim. It's not going to remember that. So how do we get around this and understand long-term persistent memory in Claude Code? Well, the first thing is just to remember that it doesn't have memory by default, which means anything that you want to save has to be written down and typically saved in some kind of markdown or documentation file. Now, there is a solution that Claude has built into this, which is creating a claude.md file. Let me quickly show you. Hey, can you make a claude.md file and just save that my name is Tim? Okay, so if I do this now and I tell it to make the claude.md file, what it's going to do is in the local directory here, it's going to create an all capital claude.md file, and it's going to save that. So you can see that claude.md, right, looks like this, project owner, name Tim. Now this claude.md file will automatically be read in at the beginning of any new session, so Claude will read any of the persistent data that's inside of that file. Now you can have this at a project level. You can also have it, as always, at the global level. So you can make multiple claude.md files. You can have a global one, and then you can have a local one. So now that I've done this, if I exit, right, and I just open up a new Claude session, say, what is my name, right, then we should see that it's able to find that this is Tim because it's going to pull from Claude MD, right? You can see there, which is the persistent long-term memory. So anything that you always want to be loaded or you want Claude to just know, you have to put in this claude.md file. This claude.md file exists inside of the .claude folder that I showed you previously. So you have .claude and then you have that capital claude.md markdown file there, and all is well. Now that is cool. However, sometimes you want to store more. You want to have more memory and you don't want it all in one single file. Now that's where creating an intelligent folder structure comes in. It's just something I want to introduce you to the concept of. So you guys may have heard of OpenClaw before. If you've heard of OpenClaw, then you understand that this is an AI orchestration platform that effectively uses LLMs in the background to, complete tasks, right? Now, what they did is they created this workspace directory, and then in the workspace directory, they've created multiple different files that they've instructed the LLMs to read anytime that they load. Now, you can do this as well in Claude, and this is why I'm quickly showing it to you, and you notice that we have docs, right? Documentation. We have memory, where we have all these different memories that are automatically being here. We have different contracts that are being stored. We have skills that have been created, right? We have various scripts that we're referencing. We have state. So as your Claude Code project gets a little bit more advanced, you can create a structure like this where you don't just have one claude.md file, you have a whole directory of multiple markdown files, skills, sub-agents, whatever it may be, so that you can just get the most out of Claude Code. So really what I'm trying to show you here is that the customization is unlimited. Your workflow will look completely different than mine, and you need to enhance Claude by adding the skills, adding the sub-agents, adding memory, creating persistent information so that it knows what's happening. Now, by default, when you have these markdown files, Claude will typically, if they're named accurately, go in and read them to get additional context. If it doesn't, you can just directly reference them, so it will go have a look at it, but that's going to add a lot of value to your projects. So again, you don't need to copy what I have here, but I'm just showing you that if you want to create kind of that persistent memory for Claude, you have to remember it doesn't have memory. You need to write it down so that it will read from that. And then you can create a structure that's more advanced than just one single file. And in that claude.md file, you can even point to various other references so that Claude has a file tree that it can go through. And this is how you build that memory architecture and how it actually keeps track of what's going on, and how if you open it from another computer or you have another session, you don't lose all of that context and information. So that's it, guys. That is going to wrap up today's video. I know there was a lot of stuff here, a little bit all over the place, but I wanted to show you a ton of different Claude Code features that you may not have seen before. I hope that you found this useful. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.